Members, it's after 2 o'clock, but I thought I'd give time for the latest information to be handed out. So welcome to the meeting of the Education Committee on Friday, the 13th of December. Lucky for some, as you used to say. I can remind all members that these proceedings will be recorded and will be made available to the public thereafter. Do you have any apologies, Claire?
Chairman, apologies from Councillors Ian Carruthers, Ian Dick, Gail McGregor, Karen Paisley and Miss Dennis, I presume, is an apology. There are 19 members present this afternoon.
And do you have any declarations of interest? Can we move to the minute of the meeting of the 26th of November 2013? Could I have someone move the accuracy of the minute? Graham Nichol, thanks, Graham. And a seconder? Councillor David McKee. And if we move on to item 4, Dumfries Learning Town, the outline business case, report by the Director of Educational Services. The first issue and the recommendations are for members to receive a recap presentation on the options related to the Dumfries Learning Town programme. Have members' approval to do that? Yep, it's unanimous. In that case, I'll pass it over to Claire Renton, who will give us an overview.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Dassid Stewart, a review of our presentations, and this is really a summary of the presentations that we gave to the elected members to the members' seminars in September, October and November, and really just a refresh, and for those of you that didn't manage to attend, hope that'll give you a good summary and insight of what the information is in the outline business case document. So, Dumfries Learning Town. Just a reminder about Dumfries Learning Town, because I think the last time we really formally spoke to you about this was on the 6th of June earlier this year, and that's where we've got the mandate from this committee to progress exploring what the vision could look like, particularly around the 2 options around the 4 schools and the senior phase scenario, and really provide the detail and respond to the work out the learning and teaching report and the consultation that has been done with parents, staff and students. So that's where we last spoke to you. So just a refresh in terms of, what is Dumfries Learning Town? Why are we doing this? What is the vision? It's about utilising what is an established education system, but working more collaboratively and collectively to actually deliver a better experience for all our children. We want all our children to have the same and consistent and better experience. And we want to utilise the assets and benefits that we have in our town. We've got a fantastic college, university, schools, but also businesses as well, and assets that we can work collectively to get a better learning and teaching experience for our children and our staff, and to make sure that every child's start in life is the best that we can do within the resources that we have. Why do we need to change? Again, just want to re-establish this, because this has been agreed previously. We want to make sure that our learners are equipped to go out into the world. Now, whether their choice is an apprenticeship, college, university, work, we want them to have the qualifications and skills that best suits their needs and strengths, and best meets the needs to make sure that they've got a pathway for life. We want to improve transitions, very clear message in everything that we've undertaken about making sure the link between school and the wider world is better. We know we can do better. Scotland knows they can do better. We want to make sure by doing that, our children, because not all our children, like ourselves, strive to 5 hires. Some of us have got vocational gifts, some have got blended gifts, and we want to make sure that our children have a breadth of learning and teaching environment and breadth of subject choice across vocational and academic that's as wide as we can make it. We want fit-for-purpose facilities. There is a significant programme throughout the UK in creating new schools, and we want to go that next step. We want to do better. Our schools were designed a number of years ago. There's still some good aspects to it, but even through the PPP programme and the primary school programme, we know there's better quality environments, and we know what that does for people's sense of value, place, and actually striving to do better. We know our estate in Dumfries needs to have investment. We know we've got overcapacity in our buildings. We have between 300 and 700 children in our buildings, and our buildings were originally designed between about 1,000 and 1,200, so huge change since then. And our schools want to integrate with our communities, so our children have a better environment, and they have the support from their communities, and also our communities get the benefit of having that school asset as a learning facility, as a teaching facility, or as a meeting facility. So since June, we've obviously set up a small internal team. We've appointed a wider project team through the hub procurement to give us that level of expertise and resource that we don't have in-house. We've done a huge data gathering exercise because we needed to understand the facts and figures. There's a lot of subjective statements before, and we wanted to make sure we had the numbers, we had the percentages, we had the data to make sure that we're making and presenting an informed business case to you. We had a visioning workshop, and that was really good because it really took a step back after the June committee to say, right, okay, let's just take everybody on board. Really wanted to make a sense of change to say, we want people to be involved in the development. We want everybody to be able to influence. We want staff, we want students, we want parents' voice, we want wider community and business voices. We want to hear from elected members. We want to understand what constituents are saying. And we brought people together and had a really good visioning workshop day. And the output of that is in the outline business case. We had an asset workshop because we needed to understand what we had available in Dumfries, what sites, what buildings, what other people were doing, not just within education, but across sport and leisure, museums, economic regeneration, and also with other key providers such as the NHS. We wanted to inform ourselves about what was happening and to have a really good, robust debate. And again, the output of that is an outline business case. We undertook utilisation surveys, and that's the first time in Scotland utilisation surveys have been done in school. It's a hugely powerful tool to really let everybody understand how the learning environments are used. Again, there's a lot of perceptions, and we wanted to make sure we had the hard evidence. It was a really good exercise. The students were involved. They've got letters, again, supporting their work placements to say they're involved in a professional exercise. We had an options workshop because out of all that, and I think we were quite clear, we wanted to explore the two options to deliver to you today. But we also wanted to make sure that with all that information and engagement, we weren't going to miss anything. We also had a lot of stakeholder events, both in terms of embedding people in the process. It was an open door at every meeting for people to come along. We really took a turn to engage, particularly the secondary schools. So they're invited to all our meetings because as schools, they're very informed, intelligent people. They also know their staff, students, parents, communities better than we do and have their trust and credibility. So really getting them at the heart of this process. We also engaged with businesses, which I think is the first time we've done that. So I had a fantastic event with the Cabinet Secretary and elected members. And we had over 100 people turn up from all different businesses, small, large, public sector, private sector. And the buzz from that evening was just phenomenal about people actually being asked, what do you think, what works, what doesn't work? And as much as we want to draw out all the good things, we have to be prepared to take the challenges as well, because that's how we're going to move on. That's how we're going to create something better. And even in that event and that night, so many opportunities about work placement, sponsorship opportunities, and it showed the benefit of listening to people and engaging with them, and actually the benefit of us working together. We've also been, a lot of people have stepped up to the plate to help us with this. Skills Development Scotland have been in schools, talking to students, lending their expertise and support. And they've been on the phone today to wish us well and to say, right, okay, what are the next steps? How can we keep it part of this? Scottish Rural University College want the Crichton campus as part of whatever option comes out of this. Children's Parliament, the Edge Foundation. So many people have stepped up to say, we're interested in what you're doing, it's new, it's exciting. We've got skills, we've got interest that we can bring to help and support you and do this. And a lot of that is for free of charge, which has been pretty amazing as well. So in terms of partnership working with the college, getting them involved, exploring, looking at their software systems for timetabling, people have been open and willing to come to the table to explore what this vision could look like. So that's a summary of what we're doing, of what we have been doing. And we've got the outline business case document, which I know you've all got a copy of now, to say that is a chunk of the work that we've done. It's not all the work we've done. We've had to try and collate it and condense it to something that's reasonable and usable and not going to kill too many more trees. I know. But just to say that's not everything, what we feel that's the important items. We've obviously had the member seminars, and we've been disseminating all this information through the seminars so that hopefully for most of you, this document wasn't unfamiliar and you didn't have to read all of it again to understand what it was saying and how it was presented. So Jen, just summary, you know, we all know our schools. We know St Joseph's, the Academy, the High School in Maxwellton. We know the background. And we've tried to set out our business case, again, in a very structured format. We have to adhere to government and Treasury guidelines and the information we're putting together to make a case. And we have to make it robust, so we're trying to respond to all the questions. We have such a diverse user group that will be interested in this document and are interested in this document that we've tried to set it out as a learning journey with signposts and children. All the images are from our schools, and our children have been very excited about seeing their images as part of this document. So the document's structured, where have we come from, what's our background, what are our schools, what are our constraints, and I think it's been a really good exercise for us as well to really look at all the legislation. You know, why do we do things? Why has it happened like this? And also to have it concisely put together. I know that's a really useful tool for parents as well. You know, basic things like really understanding what Curriculum for Excellence is and what its aspirations are. So I think it's a really good fact document to bring a lot of people up to speed, but also we feel we've tried to pitch it with colours and diagrams and interactions so that it is interesting, that people of all levels and all interests can pick what they want out of it. Our next chapter is about where we are now, and that's where you're starting to see the facts and baselines. What are the challenges we've got? What is happening elsewhere, to just demonstrate that we are looking, we are researching. Skills Development Scotland were hugely helpful in that as well, to say, and you'll be aware of examples as well, both in the UK and particularly in Europe, about what is working well. We're not being guinea pigs here. We're taking good things and putting them together to make sure it works for us. And also we've got the economic aspect as well, and making sure we've got a fitter and more agile product to take us forward in the financial future. And then we went on to what the future could like, our aims and aspirations, the different options, which I'll go into briefly. Most importantly, what the learning and teaching could look like and feel like. What are the challenges? What doesn't work at the moment? What could work better? What are the pockets of fantastic experience that we want to actually disseminate across, not only the borough, but across the region? What is the school estate that we've got at the moment? Again, because some people are familiar with the buildings, some people are not. Also, embedding ICT, technology is the future. Our kids are already using tablets, laptops, mobile phones, beyond our capabilities. And sustainability, a huge agenda for the council, and making sure, again, we're pioneering in this. Because whatever we do, we want to be the best. And obviously, we've also details about how we're going to get there. We've got the HubCo process, which is quite challenging, and we have set up a workshop. It's an internal workshop, and we've asked for a representative from each of the parties to come along to a day. It's very complex, it's full of jargon, but we want to make sure that more people understand this process. Looking at our delivery plans, we've got programmes and risk registers, and then just being very clear and open about our stakeholder engagement and actually how we've done it, who we've met, when we've met them. So that's how the document's laid out. So just a quick recap on sort of the core, the critical path that's led us to where we are. You know, we started looking initially about, we need to understand what happens in our borough. We know it's quite unique. We know 50% of children or parents don't choose their catchment secondary school to go to, which results in a very disperse set of children's postcodes against schools, and every dot there is a child's postcode. So that's where the children come from, the academy. Very diverse, difficult to plan, difficult to predict. To a large extent, the high school's the same. In Maxwellton, just pausing this a minute, this is quite an important step. It's also a eureka moment for us, because that data very much suggests to us that Maxwellton is different from the other high schools in the fact that it serves as a community school, it serves its catchment area. But we also know there's a drain there, sitting about 326 kids at the moment. Catchment says there should be about 450. Huge issues about people choosing to go elsewhere. Now, what does that mean for the community, the regeneration? Sense of place, value, aspirations. And St Joseph's. Again, a lot of parent choice to go to St Joseph's, and again, quite a disparate catchment area, which is not reflective of the actual catchment. So that led us to some interesting thinking. We started to get into diagrams, and we're trying to be as visual as possible to try and make it simple and to communicate effectively. So looking at the current arrangement we've got, you've got Maxwell, which is quite polarised at the very northwest of Dumfries. You're talking 20 to 25 minutes to get into the centre, and then you've got another 3 schools that are very close to each other. The vision that we're trying to achieve is that we all work together so there's a parity of provision and education across Dumfries. What has been very clear from all the work that we've done is each school is very different and each school is very important. Each school has a different educational experience, which will go a long way to explain why parents and students exercise such a range of options for their secondary school. But also we know they've got to work together because we can't provide the range of subjects and learning environments in the individual schools. Collectively, yes, we can. So this is like a working model. This is an ambition that we need to work together to achieve a better quality experience. So going on to the options. And again, these are very diagrammatical. So option 1 is in line with the option 1 you saw in June. So that's about the 4-school model, about keeping the 4 schools as they are. But it's not in the same sense that they would be joint curriculum, joint timetabling, joint management structures. And it would in effect mean children moving from school to access that, as per their subject requirements. Option 2A, which is the traditional one of the senior phase. So that's whereby the S4 to S6 in the 4 schools would get brought together in one establishment called the senior phase. So that means an S1 to S3 would be left at the 4 schools. And then primaries, and I probably should say this quite clearly, we are looking at primaries as part of this, but not primaries that are rural, not primaries that have had significant investment in their estate or are part of the new programme. It wouldn't make sense and value for money to move anything that's new and just been built. So these are generally the primaries that have got either size and capacity issues or estate capacity issues. So they would be augmented onto their cluster secondary school. So bringing together the children from the 4 schools would create a mass of about 1,100–1,200. Now that building in itself, when you start to map it out, is about 15,500 square metres, nearly 16,000 square metres. Now in terms of physical scale, that's bigger than the college building because it's about 14,500 square metres. So the practicality of trying to look at a site that will actually allow you to build that's accessible, that doesn't conflict with the infrastructure in Dumfries, which still gives a sense of community, is very challenging from all the work we've done. And everything you see here, there's facts and figures behind it and tables and charts. So there's a lot of supporting evidence. Option 2B. Now this option and the next one came out of a lot of the work and in response to the user engagement. This is very similar to the senior phase, but on a smaller scale. It would only involve S5 and S6. Now where this is developed from is a very clear user voice to say S4, really concerned about transition at that stage. Children and parents didn't want to be moving to S4. It's going into exam years. They don't want a new environment. They don't want new teachers that don't know them. They want to be in familiar surroundings where they've established their social pattern and networks. But why this is still on the table is that there was a consistent message that transition has to improve and could be a lot better. So still feeling like bringing a sense of people together at a key stage in their life would be useful in creating a critical mass to get the subject choice and the learning environments that they're looking for. And the final option which has come out of this work is, in the absence of another term, we're calling it the emerging option. So this is very much about the 4 schools, acknowledging that people value their communities and value the choice of going to their preferred school, because as I said before, each of the schools offer a very different educational experience. And I should say in all of these models would be integration with the college, university and businesses. So looking at different ways to make sure there's more permeability between the various areas. We are looking and have been planning for a new build at Maxwellton, not necessarily on the same site. A lot of strong information and evidence to say that that site that building should be sited closer to the bypass, so it's more accessible, more in the heart of the community. Make it more accessible, make it more visible. New build, because the structure, the way it is, and the design would be very, very difficult and expensive. So in terms of value for money under the government guidance, it would be challenging to do refurb on that. But also seeing the benefit of, if you co-located primaries with it, you really create something exciting that people feel valued, that we're investing in their area. But also it links with their community, it's accessible, it's easy for parents. Looking at a new build for the high school as well. Again, very similar structure, a lot of structural issues in those buildings. And again, it would be very difficult to refurb that for any value for money, to argue against any value for money aspect. We would look at redeveloping the high school site because of the size of that site and because of the overcapacity in that building. We have done modelling to demonstrate that can be done. And looking at redevelopment for the academy, key location in Dumfries, key building of architectural interest, lots of historical value. And we'd look to redevelop St Joseph's as well. Again, beautiful building, fantastic campus setting, really actually efficient floor prints. That's a very effective building. And we could see, and we'll show you later, there's a lot of evidence to say that refurbishments and redevelopments can be as good as new builds. So making sure that, again, there's parity by having the same quality of learning and teaching environment. But what we are looking at is taking the specialist or critical mass items out of the 4 base schools. Very much seeing a child would enrol in one of the 4 base schools, have their pastoral care there, and if they were on a traditional academic route and had your core 5 hires, you'd still have the critical mass to do all your hires in your core school, and you'd probably need to with the timetable as it is at the moment. But creating this learning hub where you're pulling together classes and numbers, so your advanced hires, your more bespoke hires, your vocational subject, really responding to the fact that we want our children to have more vocational education, we want them to have options, responding to the Wood Commission, looking at the specialist subjects. We can't afford to create fantastic specialist subjects in all 4 schools. Bring them together and creating the best so our kids experience the best that's relating to what the outside business demands are. But also making sure it's a exciting learning environment and looking at a model maybe that you could open 365 days a year. So if we get it right and kids want to be there, they want to come in during their holidays. It provides an extra support system for the parents that might be working during the holidays as well. So lots of pastoral care there. And weaving in a lot of the additional fantastic support. You know, we've got Skills Development Scotland, we've got the Prince's Trust, we've got great employability people in-house, and giving them more access to the kids and the kids more access to them. So they're getting good career advice, that they've got actually businesses on site, and timetabling it collectively, both across the schools. But the college software shows we can map the college software as well. So the college facilities, both resource and physical, can actually be part of this programme. SRUC are quite happy for the Crichton campus to be mapped on as timetabling facilities as well. So making it easy and accessible, so we're getting that breadth of learning environment and also the breadth of subject choice. And it's also about supporting children in developing basic resilience skills, looking at movement between the schools and the learning hub, making sure the learning hub is accessible, getting children used to managing their time, buses, basic life skills. So when, say, they do go up to Edinburgh, Glasgow, that they're not going to feel like a fish out of water because they've not been used to movement in the wider world. There's so many different levels this is of interest. And just before going, there's a lot of background information in there in terms of travel plans, sustainability, all of this embedded. We want to promote health and well-being. We want to encourage children to walk, to cycle. We want encouraging use of the other assets, you know, whether that's the archiving centre. There's so many other fantastic learning facilities in this town that we can use better. So we've gone out and we've spoken. We had a parent council event and we had 25 out of the 32 parent councils across Dumfries represented. We also had a community engagement event through the Nithsdale Committee, and we have been publicising it through everybody that's been involved in this process, through the schools, through staff forums, through the unions, through the parent councils and through every community aspect we can to make sure that people are aware of this, have the ability to say what they think, and have got access to the information. So we've got hard copies for all the elected members. We've put hard copies of the document in all the schools and libraries. We've put electronic copies online. We've emailed them out to the unions and all the interested parties because we've collated all the emails and involvement throughout the process. So really just pushing hard to collate a balanced view to give to you. Also offering support. So my team have been out doing individual sessions with schools as well, and just being open and willing to have honest information sharing. So what we've handed out today is the summary scoring sheet, because we'd produced a scoring sheet and a set of guidelines, and the scoring sheet was very much built around the work of the learning and teaching and the consultation to try and make sure the criteria was scored against. This has been a really hard thing to do because everybody has different levels of understanding and confidence with this document. Some people have felt really uncomfortable about scoring it. Some people have been happy about it. Some people have just felt it's too complex. So we've accepted comments as well, and we've summarised all the comments, not summarised, we've basically given you all the comments that we've received as well. Generally out of the scoring, and I appreciate this doesn't add up to 100%, but what it is everybody could score the options separately. So they might have had two favourite options, they might have had one favourite option. But just very clearly, the emerging model has been coming out through the scoring sheets and through the comments. We've just had one comment back, somebody who preferred, one person who preferred the senior phase solution. We have had 19 out of the 32 schools provide either comments or a scoring sheet. But that's representing a collective of people, and it's very difficult to actually ascertain. We've asked what the collective number they're representing, but they're representing either on behalf of their schools or their parent councils. But it's just reinforced what the general feeling or feedback was about the emerging option being the clear preferred option. But we wanted to share the scoring aspects and the comments with you, and we've fed back to everybody to say that we'd do that, just to make sure, again, you've got a very balanced view and feedback about how the consultation's been. So just to clarify, in all the solutions and options that we presented, it's about collaboration, it's about working more effectively, more efficiently together. It's about having our college and university and businesses as part of this to make sure we've got a joined up experience. It's about using our assets better, and some really fantastic ideas about integrating museums in schools, getting some space for some of these exhibitions that never see the light of day, but could really support and bring to life a lot of the Curriculum for Excellence work. Making sure transport works. We've got a transport plan, we've looked at, modelled all the options. And again, with health and being and the green agenda, really want to start looking at reducing pollution, reducing congestion, and increasing cycling and walking activity. We want to make sure that we get the space right. And in all these scenarios, the minimum reduction in space is 20%. We're also looking at, across the secondary school, we're delivering education to about 2,500 children. We've got space for 3,500 children. So it could look to take away about 1,000 places, which is a huge overcapacity for the region. And making sure our community feel part of it, because the community support the schools support the community. And there's a lot of good research coming out of Finland to say, why are Finland doing great in PISA? Because they've got good communities and good homes which support their children. And how can we create a vision here that actually helps support that? And as I mentioned earlier, we have been very active in speaking to everybody and anybody that we can, bringing on board every sense of help, expertise in this area, and just making sure that we are doing our job and working hard to collate the best outcome for our children. We also, and this will have to continue, I want every class, every teacher, every student to feel like they've had a say in this project. You know, Vanessa's been out doing postcard exercises, and you'll see that at the back. So it's a very visual thing, but saying, well, how does that make you feel at the moment, the school environment, and what do you want? And again, you've got to look at different ways of consulting. So to just give a paper to a child and say, what do you think of this? We're going to get no feedback. So we've really been proactive about looking at different ways of dealing with it. And we're looking at projects going forward about how do we just keep this momentum going. There's been a really good buzz, excitement. Some of the feedback we've had from the kids, so sensible and so practical. We've got to listen to it. So that's what we've been doing for the past 6 months, and hopefully you'll see the product of the report. And obviously we're here today to present it to you and to get your views.
Thank you, Claire. Before I throw it open to the floor, can I just say that we were originally going to be here in June last year to make a decision. And I think, like most members, I was very uncomfortable about making any sort of decision because we didn't have any evidence base on which to make it. And I'm really pleased about the work that the project team have put in to produce such a large amount of information on which we can actually base a decision. And I think there's an awful lot of very, very interesting information within this, apart from the Learning Town aspect about what we actually do right and what we do wrong within the schools in Dumfries. So I'll throw it open to the floor. If you want to ask questions directly to Gail or just make comments, please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 or 3 questions to ask, but I'll come in one at a time, I think. It's about the sheet here with the percentages on it. What I would like to know, option 1, 2, 2B, etc. How many people is actually filled in these? Because is it 30? Like, and for instance, option 2B, St Andrews Primary School, was it 30% of 1,000 people that gave you a reply, or was it 30% of 20 people? That information would be really handy because you've got an awful big jump from sort of 30% up to 87%. That would make me think that there's more people responded in the early stages to option 1, 2 and 2B, and your big number, 87, is a lesser number of people who have actually replied to the questionnaire. Is there any background to that as how many people this is representing?
We'll have to go back to the individual schools because we have been pushing right up to like 10 minutes before this meeting to get these things back for you. The percentages are not related to the amount of people. The percentages are actually the scoring. So actually the scoring they gave for that option is the amount against the number of people. So out of all the different headings, so say they give 5% for one and 4% for another, that's the total of what they thought each option would deliver against a learning and teaching aspect or a sustainability aspect or a consultation aspect. But what we do need to do, and I agree with your point, is we need to go back to these schools and say, are you representing just your parent council? Are you representing your whole parent body? Or are you representing your whole staff body? Generally, it's groups of people. So when you see the likes of St Andrews, that'll be, and I'm just surmising here, we'll have to go and check, it could be the whole parent council that's representing or the whole parent body. So we just need to get the numbers against that.
I mean, just for clarification, when you give somebody 4 choices, there is 100% response to that. So if you've got 20% like option 1, 20% option 2, 20, that's 60 and 40. It should add up to 100. I mean, it's very unclear how many people responded to this, and you get where I'm coming from. I mean, you can only have 100% of anything, and if there's 4 options, that 4 should go into 100 in some way. You know, 10%, 20%, 50%, 60%. It shouldn't add up to you've got 170% or something there. You know, there should only be 100% of anything to give you a fair, comparison.
I understand what you're saying. I understand the confusion. We'll get clarity in that, and we'll get clarity in the exact specific numbers. As I say, we've had to chase the schools and the parent bodies quite hard to get this information out. And even the last parent council meetings were happening last night, so they're just taking time. But it's not about, it was a collation of their percentage on the scoring sheets, and there is another level down from this to say I think it's about 15 items that they score against, and they give a points for each item, and then it's the total of those points. So that might be 87, and then each of the one has something different. So we've just tried to average them out to try and give some sort of presentation to summarise without giving you, we can give you all the background in detail, but we're trying to just make it, just to demonstrate where the trend's coming, and the trend was very strong about supporting the emerging option. So there's no dubiety about that, but I agree with you about we need to be more transparent about the actual numbers that they're representing.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. I mean, in a week in which I let members know that our youngsters in P3 and 5 had improved in numeracy, I'm glad to get the explanation about the 100%, but just to be absolutely clear for the councillor, what we're saying here is that in the scoring sheet, if people thought that option 1 delivered absolutely everything that they wanted on every single point, it would have come out as 100% for that option. Okay? If option 2 had got 90% of what you wanted, 90, so it could have gone 100, 90, 90, 90. If a group of people took a view on what each option delivered for them. So it's the percentage of how close each option came to delivering the ideal perfect situation. So it's not about adding up to 100, it's about how high in terms of meeting expectations each option came. Does that explain that?
Thank you. Some of us left school at 15.
Ronnie?
I think that's clarified it, because I wasn't quite sure about that aspect as well, and I did think it was something like that. But it's thanks very much for the clarification. What I can say is, on percentages, on numbers as well. I was at every single consultation meeting, and I've got to say that the percentage of people that were at these consultation meetings was very high against the first options or the super school and that. So I can, say with accuracy about that.
Dick?
Thanks, Chair. I think we've been asked to look at this emerging option and support it. I think it's certainly got a lot of merits on it, but there's still not an awful lot of work to be done on it. There's an interesting comments from the teacher at Dumfries High School which we've got in front of us. The question of the practicalities of moving from their base school to the hub. That's obviously involved time. So I'd like some comments on how that's going to work, and the timetable initiatives where it might not be possible for pupils to move between schools, and therefore their options are going to be limited. I'll get all my questions in at once. Obviously, this is a blueprint for Dumfries, but I think we've got to take into consideration the rest of the region, right? We've got to move forward in a way where it's not seen as that this is a two-tier education system where the Dumfries children are benefit from greater educational opportunities or perhaps learning in better facilities. So I think we've got to, as a parallel to the Dumfries Learning Town, we've got to look at the whole region and move forward as a region so that we have got equality of educational opportunities and equally good facilities across the region.
I accept that, but we're here at the moment to make the decision on the option about Dumfries Learning Town. That's not going to mean we're not going to do anything in terms of the rest of the region. And I would hope that what we're offering within the Learning Town would actually extend out to other schools within the region as well, particularly when we move into a period of, or we'll be installing super speed broadband, etc. So, the world's changing in the way we're delivering education. That's part of what we're looking at here. Yep.
I think I'd agree with you there, but I think as part of it, as an education committee, we should be looking at the broader picture as well, and make sure as part of this blueprint and moving forward that we do include the rest of the state and the rest of the children in a forward-looking plan.
Ted? Peter? Wants to come in.
I'll get Dougal to respond to your question about the movement of children first.
And just before I do that, I would say that in terms of the impact of developments in the borough on the rest of the authority, we've kept that very much in mind, that we would want a successful model in Dumfries to have lessons for the rest of the region,
but also that we would want youngsters across the region to be able to access what's going on in the hub, for example, through video conferencing, IT and distance learning packages. And that's shown to be a fairly well-proven method in other parts of rural communities in Scotland. In terms of the movement of youngsters, clearly there would be a need for collaborative timetables and for a common timetable across the borough. And built into that would be either block times or half days or even full days for youngsters to be doing particular curricular enhancements, which would include the hub. So the youngsters would opt to take a particular course in a particular location, and within their timetable there would be scope for movement time within that. Again, Claire mentioned the notion of having a timetable which incorporated other educational facilities, both the traditional ones of the college and the university, but also other organisations and businesses in Dumfries who would like to offer an educational component, and that would be built into an overarching timetable that the youngsters would be able to select from.
Peter?
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a comment on the percentages here. If you rank each of the 18 respondents on how they assessed each option, 16 out of the 18 actually prefer the emerging option. And just 2, there's Trakia and A rank it 4 and 2 respectively.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. How does the size of the Learning Hub compare with the projected size of the Senior School 46 and the Senior School 5 and 6?
Very crudely, in size terms, the Learning Hub would be about 4,000 metres squared, was what we've planned on in terms of who would be going there. That would be between 30 and 40% the size of the S4 to S6 offering, and it would be just over 40 to 50% of the senior phase offering.
Jim?
Are you confident that there are sufficient accessible sites to locate a Learning Hub?
From the initial review that we've done, there's a number of sites that we would want to consider. Once we've got down to a preferred option, we didn't want to make any assumptions before this meeting, and obviously full council next week, we would undertake a full site options appraisal. We know all the sites in Dumfries, we know what size we need and facilities. We get a user working group together and actually explore it in a lot more detail, because that's a fundamental point that we have to go on. That's the next step.
Graham's the first time speaker.
Thanks, Chair. Two comments before I ask a question. One is, I'm glad to see that we're now catching up with what businesses are wanting, which is a different outcome from their child's education. I mean, in a previous life, I was chair of the Federation of Small Businesses, and that was one of the problems that we had, was that we ran out of plumbers, joiners, whatever, the hand skills. So I'm glad that we're sort of looking at that and addressing that. The ability to cope, I mean, if the children in Dumfries can't cope with going to university, etc., how are the children from Whithorn and, without getting parochial, Kirkcudbright and places like that? I think it's been ongoing for generations. So I think it's a good thing that there is a break somewhere and they have to learn to fend for themselves at some later stage. But I'm disappointed there's only, in this sheet that we've got in front of us, there's only 2 parent councils which are in this. Is there going to be more parent councils? Are we going to get an update at a later stage with the further parent councils? Because if there's 39 schools and only 2 parent councils have responded here, why is that?
The parent council cohort, parent forum percentages might be included actually in the results and responses that we've actually had from the schools, because obviously every parent has the ability now through the new forum to be a part of the parent council forum. It's just that some of the schools have made responses purely from that core group, and some responses have come from the school which would have had representatives from the parent council. I myself went to a school, St Michael's, just last week, and we had 2 parents and 1 parent council member, and that came in as a response of 3 from that school. It was a mixed.
Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make 2 points. The first one is I refer to page 11 of our papers, Appendix 1, the executive summary. The 3rd paragraph in the middle says, other important considerations are how to tackle problems like unequal patterns of use across the 4 secondary schools. High numbers of P7 pupils moving up to out of catchment area secondary schools. That's obvious in the papers here, particularly. It looks like a paintball exercise, the location of these children are scattered far and wide. Our first question then is, are you confident that what we are bringing forward here will, in the absence of the ability to compel people to go to certain schools, and I presume nobody is going to advocate direction of parent choice, however much some people might. Well, that's one thing that no politician would touch anyway. Are you confident that this will encourage people to look at their local schools? That's the first question. I don't know if you want to do that, or
We'll get Dougal to answer that first.
Thank you.
You're absolutely right. We're not in the business of compelling anybody to attend anywhere, but I think there's a much greater likelihood of people choosing their local school if what's on offer in that local school is as good as it is anywhere else, and in facilities that are as good as they are anywhere else.
Alison?
Thank you. And the second one might be more for the director. I don't know. We'll see. That's page 20. Job sizing and migration of staff to new structures. Suggests that changes were to result in significant downsizing. Salaries would be conserved for a limited period. That might be quite a big exercise. Are we confident that we will be able to achieve that? There'll be obviously questions of conservation, and this is a new groundbreaking. There might not be anything to compare it with directly. I presume that we'll have to work hard at this one.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, there would certainly be quite a lot of work to be done there, but we did have a very constructive discussion previously at the time when there was still a lot of uncertainty about the way forward. And even at that stage where we were hypothesising, we were able to take forward that argument quite well and in a good collegiate way across through the LNCT. I think what will help now is, assuming we take a decision on a single option as we move forward, that really allows us to concentrate on what that means. There are other examples across the authority that we're currently looking at where we've got some all-through management structures which need to be resolved, because job sizing nationally doesn't easily lend itself to that agenda. So we need to tackle that anyway. But given what I think you could certainly agree is a very strong union support for what looks to be the emerging option and the one that's currently got the highest support, that would suggest to me that there'll be, where there's a will, there's a way, and people want to be proactive about finding solutions to that agenda.
Alistair?
That sounds encouraging. Thank you.
We're taking first speakers, so Ian?
Thank you. Claire, I understand you said about the hub that it would be 4,000 square metres. How does that compare to the footprint of the 4 existing schools?
It's a lot less. If you're wanting a building that I think is roughly about the same size in terms of scale, if you look at the old Tesco at the Palmerston, from memory, that's about 42,000 square feet. So that's probably about the size. You wouldn't probably do a single story. You'd more likely to be a 2-story environment. So it's roughly something of that size.
If you recall back to the Nistdale community event, I think one suggestion from the floor was, when the school numbers are getting less throughout Dumfries, do we need to retain 4 schools And I think one of the suggestions was siting the hub on the academy site.
We responded to that one night to say, in terms of the academy's a very tough site, and even look at remodelling, you can't do major significant redevelopment there. But something that's very clear from us is having a sense of identity about the hub that is really stands by itself, and it's not aligned with any of the, because it's about parity, it's about perception. It needs to be a facility that has got a parity of access and understanding for all. So the understanding at this point in time and thinking is that it would not be co-located with any of the schools, because then the perception would be that it belonged to that school. So there is importance about that, and also about positioning, because this should be a community facility as well as a school facility, so we want the communities to access it as well. There's a lot of really exciting possibilities that I'm looking forward to flushing out if we do go down that route next year.
Mr. Burrow?
Thank you, Chair. I think, as is clear from the responses you have in front of you, that the very large majority of teachers within Dumfries see strong value in the emerging option. And because of that, just echoing what the Director said a minute ago, they are very committed, if the Council does take that decision, to doing whatever is necessary to make that work as well as it possibly can. And that certainly would include meaningful and useful discussions and agreement on staffing structures for the schools within the borough, to which they are committed. We had quite lengthy discussions and negotiations about some aspects of these things before the summer, but we agreed that it was really impossible to take that further meaningful at that stage when there were a range of different possible hypotheses of how things might develop on the table, and working out detailed staffing structures for what have been very significantly different models just simply wasn't worthwhile at that stage. But there is a strong commitment to settling down and negotiating and agreeing on all these matters on whichever option is decided on finally.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Do we have any more first-time speakers? Ted Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just returning to the point made by Councillor Brodie, regarding the benefits that would spill over to, other schools in the region. I'd fully accept the point he actually makes, and I would expect that to occur. But in practical terms, the only opportunity that we have for extensive collaborative working actually is within Dumfries Town, because it is the only place with 4 secondary schools. I think also the fact that the teachers are not just generally in favour of the emerging option, but almost wholly behind it, kind of leads us on to saying that this is a kind of option that we should be adopting. I just hope today that we can actually achieve consensus on this, and that we don't actually have to go to any kind of vote. I certainly, on all the sessions I attended, got the very strong impression from both parents and teachers and pupils that the emerging option was, in fact, the favoured one, given that it actually retains what's best within our schools and actually adds something to it. So it takes away a large part of the risk, but actually gives us the opportunity to expand our educational system and perhaps be the envy of other places in Scotland.
Thank you. I think it would be appropriate in response to what has been said, just to clarify that the response of the Catholic churches that were delighted that denominational schooling in Dumfries has been given this seal of approval. Parents have opted for denominational schooling by choice, and it's an important aspect of parental choice that continues. and in the emerging option, that would remain to be the case. It would also be the case that we're looking at the closer collaboration of the denominational schools throughout the region, and that with St Joseph's, with the renewed energy coming from the new understanding of the school here, then it would link in well throughout the region with the denominational schooling there to support those parents who are making that choice for denominational schooling.
Thank you for that. Do we have any more first-time speakers? Oh, sorry, yeah, Robert.
Just a couple of points. Where would the responsibility for monitoring pupil progress lie between the school and the hub? Was my first question. The second one is, what actually constitutes core subjects? I wasn't quite clear about that.
The responsibility for care and guidance will remain in the base school, because it's in the base school that choices will be made and the curriculum will be organised. Although, as Claire pointed out, we would be looking to concentrate the kind of the more advanced and senior phase career guidance in the hub, so that youngsters would get the very best opportunities that were available to them in terms of the guidance, but also in terms of apprenticeships, work experience, and the offers that would be there across the borough.
Required to be a good working relationship between
Absolutely.
the two institutions. That linkage must be clarified.
Both in terms of the curriculum and the care that supports the curriculum.
Rob?
Thanks, Chairman. I would go back to Ted Thompson's point. I mean, I very much hope that we end up with something here that is the envy of Scotland. I think that should be our aim, and actually, I think that we might very well achieve that. I do agree with Councillor Brodie in that there's a lot more work to do. I mean, odd though that may seem, having ploughed through the very large amount of work that has been done already, and being somewhat surprised to discover, as Claire said, that there's even more that we didn't get. I wondered how on earth that could be possible, but nevertheless, there is a lot more work to do. There's no question about it. I mean, at the moment, we only have the outline and the broad brush picture of where we're going to get to. I say only, it's substantial and it's very, very important. All the detail comes next. And I think that's the important thing that we have to do today. We have to stop at some point working on and scrutinising 4 options and concentrate on scrutinising and working on one, because that's how we'll actually make progress and deliver the best outcome that will be the envy of the rest of Scotland. So it's with that in mind, and I'm conscious it's maybe jumping the gun because it's talking about what we do after we've made the decision, but it was looking at 2.7 in the recommendations on the further detail and progress on the agreed option once we have that. Maybe to get a feel for how that would work, both in terms of how it would be reported to the Education Committee, but just as importantly, how we'd be communicating that to the wider community in Dumfries, because I would anticipate that the interest will not diminish once we've made the decision here today. In fact, it will only grow. So maybe a feel for how that would be managed would be quite useful.
Okay.
Very much in terms of user engagement and stakeholder management, it's really just to capitalise on the approach that we've taken to date. So we would do very much what we did last time and create a user and stakeholder engagement plan, so we could communicate in advance about how we'd continue to intend to have users embedded in the process and how we communicate externally, and just strengthen that from the experience that we've had. So that would really set out our intentions. What we're doing at the moment, just generally across the 4 options, is looking at working plans for them about how we deliver them, and we've already started some of that process in place. What I'm proposing to do, again, forgive me for going into sort of hubco terminology, but we have a process called the MPR, which we've used at Dumfries, which is the WBT, which is the new project request form. And what you can actually do is bring on a Tier 1 contractor early, who then can start going into the detail and flushing it out. And it's working really well at WBT that we have regular user groups with staff, students, parents. We've got Stephen Heffel coming back and introducing Dumfries Learning Town as well. And really just a very active engagement process. We've found having the contractor and designer in at an early stage is really hugely beneficial, because they've got a huge level of experience, and putting that with the schools is just, as we're seeing at WBT, is creating some dynamic and fantastic solutions. We've already had a discussion with Hub to say would you be prepared for this? We've started drafting documentation. Obviously, we can't do anything until we get a preferred option. But suffice to say, the Tier 1 contractors are already wanting to go around the schools and meet the community. So there's a huge level of excitement and interest out there about the potential of starting something here. So we have a working plan about how we'd approach it, starting very early next year.
Do you have any more first-time speakers? No. In that case, I'll move on to second speakers, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. That bit of paper's too big. It's covered my buttons. Glad you didn't hear that. Right, I've forgotten what I was going to say now. Just to follow up on something that Councillor Blake brought up earlier on. You've got 3 schools in Dumfries all running at about 50 to 60% occupancy. I mean, I tend to look at things from a sort of business point of view. I mean, no business would have factories putting out 50% of their output and still keep them open. I think if I picked Ian Blake up right, he was talking about actually closing at Dumfries High and putting the hub there. Not Academy, sorry. Not co-locating, but actually replacing the academy with the hub and leaving yourself with 3 schools rather than 4. It seems to me silly to have 3 schools at least, and I don't know St Joe's figures because they weren't in the paper, but the other 3 are running at about 50 to 60% occupancy. Now, it would save this authority an awful lot of money if you didn't have all the overheads of 4 schools, if you only had the overheads of 3 schools. I mean, there would be less staff, less heating, less rates, less repairs, etc., and it could easily be accommodated when your schools are not exactly bursting at the seams. That was my first point. The next one was on page, only about a couple of pages in, there's no page number on it, but the timetabling in this document we have here says there's been various attempts in the past to create a common timetable for Dumfries secondary schools. These attempts have failed on a number of grounds, including subject choice, pupils changing their minds. Now, your emerging option relies heavily on a common timetable. Now, if it's failed on attempts, not just one attempt in the past, but plural, what makes you confident you can actually make it work this time?
Dougal?
I said that there was going to be no compulsion in terms of where people were told to send their children, which schools parents were told to send their children to, but there could well be compulsion in terms of what the structure of the school day and the common timetable would look like. And I think that's something that people would sign up to at a very early stage. I think that one of the problems with the creation of timetables in the past is that they've been happening quite late on, and therefore they were not in place when youngsters were making their original subject choices. They were the results of the subject choices rather than the template that was used to help assist those choices being made. So I think there'll be a number of things that would mean that it'd be much less likely to fail, particularly if schools are all gaining from the process that we're talking about in the development of a learning town.
Just clarify that 3 or 4 schools or what we have, hopefully 3, at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, it will be maths in every school. Is that what you're talking about? A common timetable?
Not necessarily, no, but the actual structure of the timetable would be the same in each school. What the schools would offer within that could be slightly different, particularly in the junior phase. But in the senior phase, it'd be much more likely that what you've just described would be happening.
Peter?
Thank you, Chair. If we end up going with the emerging option, I mean, I see the advantage of that of providing critical mass for certain subjects and, of course, providing vocational training. I also see it as a possibility of providing a critical mass for sport. And I'd be very keen, if this was the option that we went with, that we would be looking at maybe providing additional sporting facilities attached to the learning hub or whatever.
Okay.
Certainly. We've obviously got the fantastic hub at Maxwellton, and we've got David Keswick Centre as well, so we saw some good starts. We're already in discussion with Sport and Leisure to see how would you approach this, how do we create something fantastic that integrates and augments what we're doing. We've got a really good handle on what we're delivering with respect to sport and leisure down here and exploring all the options, you know, whether it's a climbing wall or a fencing alley or all sorts of exciting things with clever design could actually be incorporated with a minimal cost. So yes, Sport and Leisure colleagues are working with us and are very excited about that opportunity.
Graham?
Thank you, Chair. Looking through the figures, etc., it looks like that the emerging option is the most popular, and I have no problem with that. But it's not a popularity contest. This is about children's education. And my question is educationally this the best option? That's what I would like to be clarified on. And also, Mr. Birrell suggested that teachers would be very much behind the emerging option if that's what the council chooses to do. I would expect the teachers to be behind any option that the council take up.
Well, can I answer that? I mean, what we've got to recognise is the secondary schools, not only in Dumfries but throughout the region, are doing very, very well, and improving all the time. We've made no secret in terms of the administration that the emerging option is the one which we would support, because to a large extent it retains what we have in terms of the excellent education which we're getting already from the system which we have, but enhances that in terms of the learning hub, which actually enables us to give far more vocational training, which is something which we sadly lacked. We always had this tension between academic and vocational training, and I think personally it's got a bit out of kilter in terms of the academic. We're producing far too many graduates and not enough engineers and technicians, etc. So I think this is a really exciting option, but not only in terms of the education of youngsters, the fact that we open up the entire system to community use as well in terms of that, because, we've moved away from the situation where you leave school and that's the end of your education effectively. People want to come back, they need to come back into education, learn new things and then move on in their careers.
To just come back, I totally agree with you and a lot of your comments there, but I would quite like the professionals maybe to have answered my point about the educational bit about it.
Happy to bring in the professionals.
Yeah. I'm quite happy to take on Councillor Nicker's point there, simply because the scoring sheet, the vast majority of the points that people were asked to score against were educational. So it's popularity in terms of what the education on offer would be. So, yeah, and I think we feel very confident that the youngsters in Dumfries in the future will get a better deal, both in terms of the quality and the choice that will be available to them, as well as the locations that these things are available to them in.
The director wants to come in.
Yeah, and I think just for the avoidance of any doubt in terms of the educational merit of this and the backing from the educational department and teachers, I think you're right, it's not a popularity contest, but building consensus is incredibly important. You can have as many ideas as you want. If you can't get everybody on board and working together, they won't be successful. So I think we're really delighted that consensus has been built around this. There's no doubt that if we had started with a traditional view of spending some money in Dumfries, we may have ended up simply knocking two schools together, because that's what most other authorities did. But in fact, precisely because there was hypothesis around more radical options, and in the rejection of those, we've reached, I think, a really good place where I think this will be the envy of Scotland. It will be the most radical thing happening in Scotland, but it also takes away too many risks that we were maybe seeing before, and we can guarantee that people are behind it. We set out to have a whole town solution. We set out to have better transition between primary and secondary, and further on transition. We set out to get more opportunities for older pupils that they wouldn't normally get in a traditional school. We set out to get better partnership with learners and other partner learners, and we set out to get investment that would make a much bigger difference than simply some new buildings for some children. And all of that is achieved within the emerging option, arguably. I know you've still to vote on it, but all of that is achieved in there. And the added advantage is that parents, pupils and staff are all behind that. So I just think to avoid any doubt there, the education department, and certainly it would seem the schools, are 100% behind the emerging option as a way to take things
I'll take Jim Dempster as a belated first-time speaker.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm not John Martin, despite what the notice says. I'm much better looking than John on a good day. Well, that's maybe not a good day today. I think this is nothing but a good news story, Chair, and I think we will agree that. And on a quick calculation, we've got 2,433 pupils spread across the school estate, and I presume that's what we're preparing for. The only thing I would flag up is if it's a really good news story and it works particularly well, you might have 300 pupils that are currently going to Wallace Hall that want to relocate back into Dumfries. So I just hope you're making capacity for that, because there was an issue about capacity raised before. And I think that would be good for the pupils if they could go to a school, take away the travel problems, and in its own way that deals with carbon emissions, etc., etc. But as long as you're prepared for that eventuality, what will then do with a big building in Wallace Hall that no pupils are in is a different question again, but that's not for today. I just want to note that it is a good news story and remind you that that is a potential issue you may have to deal with.
Claire?
Yeah, it's been on our radar as well, and we've done the mapping for Thornhill and had discussions, and part of that will form a wider non-Dumfries aspect in terms of looking at the educational strategy across the region, because we have responsibility.
Alistair, you want to in here?
Thank you, Chair. Part of my question has already been answered because Councillor Dempster's question. However, I would just like to seek assurance that we do have the flexibility. I mean, we look at the demographics and we see that we've got buildings that are well below capacity because there are fewer children around, but it wasn't so long ago that we were told, I mean, statistics are notoriously difficult to predict. I mean, at one time it was going to look like the average age of the population of Scotland was going to be 65 or something, but according to figures back in 2000, the population was going to fall to 4.5 million, but now we're it's higher than it's ever been. So I'm just wanting to make sure that we have the flexibility to ensure that if there is a surge in the population, who knows, obviously you have time to react to that in decades, but I presume we have the flexibility built in there. And that brings me to, I always give two questions at the same time, Chair. I don't know if you're going to slap me down now or let me finish. Oh, thank you, you're so kind. The buildings, I've searched, I've seen it in here. Some of the buildings are due for replacement. Two of the schools we're looking at replacement, and the other two are redevelopment. Presume that the Academy and St Joe's are listed buildings, so we obviously have to take on board what we can do there. Although that might be a good thing, because I think it looks like the parts that are considered for demolition are the newer parts. So that's the legacy of the rather inferior work that was done in the middle of the last century, whereas buildings older than that seem to have stood the test of time. So I take it we are constrained because they're listed buildings, but I presume we can work around that.
Yeah, with respect to the historic buildings, we're aware of the listing. We've also got the titles of all the footprints and any leases, access ways. So we've been looking at all the normal legal challenges you'd expect in terms of redeveloping a site. So we're very particular that we wouldn't want to lose any of the fantastic architecture we've got, because it certainly adds to the educational experience for both the Academy and St Joseph's. In terms of flexibility and future proofing, we've obviously looked at forward projected demographics, but as you say, that can be quite challenging, particularly with the pattern of Dumfries. And we've also looked at historic trends as well to try and map that on. And that's why we've done a lot of the postcode mapping exercise as well, to actually try and map out the reality of it. You know, demographics look like it's sort of plateauing off for the region. So we are planning an estate on that basis. But with the buildings, if they're done right, and they should be done right in this era, that you have the agility and the future proofing both within the built environment, because you have the flexibility about how you use your accommodation. But then, you know, if you did have significant baby booms, you know, maybe then you look at future-proofing by saying you could do phased extensions, because obviously we don't want to create a state which is significantly more than we need at the moment, because then we've got the revenue implications about actually running them. And everything that we're doing, whatever parameters, we are going to be looking at least a 20% reductions and 1,000 place savings, huge inroads to creating a much more agile educational learning and teaching environment across the town.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair. It was just the question I asked earlier. Part one of my question wasn't answered. Was there any, did anybody actually look at closing one of the schools to reduce the capacity, or not refurbishing or rebuilding?
I think my initial response to that was committee had already previously ruled that none of the 4 schools were to close, that being a previous mandate that we were governed under. But I would probably say that in all the work that we've done, it supports the models that we've come out with. There's no work that we've done that has suggested that any of the 3 schools should close. And just to reassure you as well, in terms of your previous point, that we are creating through these models, whatever one it is, the most effective and efficient estate. If you all bring it together or you keep it in 5 locations, there's very little cost differential, because you're still working on an allocation of space per student. So if you've got 2,500 students, say in 5 locations at 500, you're still allowing 10 metres squared per student, as well as them coming together, so you're not building any more space.
Timothy?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just start by saying that I think that the advantages that most teachers see in the merging option are very much centred on educational advantages. Prior to the merging option being on the table, teachers, secondary teachers in Dumfries had by and large supported option 1 as it then was, because they saw it that as providing the most secure and stable secondary educational experience for young people at that age. However, the emerging option combines a number of educational advantages that option 1 cannot so easily provide, of particularly specialist facilities for curricular options that would be too expensive to provide in all 4 secondary schools. I have, just reflecting on Councillor Nicholl's point, I have said on several occasions over the years in debate that teachers recognise that it is your educational service that we are operating. It's the Council's educational service. I think I did conclude my previous intervention by saying that teachers' representatives would negotiate as effectively and meaningfully as they could to make whichever option the Council finally adopted work as well as they could. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim McComb?
Thanks, Chair. As Councillor Dempster said earlier on, this very much appears to be a good news story. That you are reducing the capacity significantly, but rather than closing one school, you're doing it by downsizing each of the schools. The Learning Hub offers opportunities for minority subjects to be taught, subjects which would not otherwise appear in the curriculum. So obviously you're widening the choice for pupils. I would simply like an assurance that similar consideration is being given to widening the choice for pupils elsewhere in Dumfries and Galloway.
Short answer is yes, in terms of both what Dougal said before, in terms of having out-of-borough access to this facility by using technology. But, to give an example of sort of the wider access, we've already started discussions at Dalbeattie and looking at having joint discussions with Castle Douglas and Coopbury about mapping of subjects in that area, and we've already brought the college in to see what should or could the offering be, and making sure there's a widening access of both the environment but the subject, but making sure it's relevant for that area as well. That's quite important too.
David?
Thank you, Chair. Doctor. Am I too soon to ask questions on the consideration of Langlands? Is that to be done in the future, or have you done some consideration, or have you considered up to now what the intention is with it?
Okay.
There is an allowance in for Langlands and Elmbank, and obviously additional support needs is very important for us in our region. We want to make sure we get it right. The head teacher for Langlands has been involved in all the learning and teaching groups and the general teaching forums. And again, we've met with her this week in anticipation that we want to go into more detailed discussions. Again, a lot of this detail is predicated on us getting down to a preferred option to allow a meaningful discussion. But again, quite excited about that as well. We've looked at the Langlands facility, we've looked at what they offer, as well as Elmbank. So we do really well with our schools for children with additional support needs, and very clear that they warrant a very key work stream and attention to make sure that we get the right solution. We're looking at lots of things about, mainstreaming and how that's important in terms of developing children and giving them opportunities, but also letting them have the benefit of facilities like the hub as well, because then that gives them a wider range of choice and environments suitable to their needs at particular times. So yes, but a lot more detail to do.
Finally, Colin, I think we'll bring to an end then.
Sorry, I keep butting in here. I just wondered what provision or plans for vocational studies will be at the 4 schools, or are they all going to be at the hub? Very keen in vocational studies. There's an awful lot of people who aren't academic.
Each of the schools will have what you would call base vocational facilities, so that the traditional technical subjects, home economics and so on, can be taught up to a particular level there. But the hub would have more sophisticated facilities, so if you like, would be a bridge between what happens in school and what then happens at further education college. And that we might well deploy some further education staff in helping deliver those more sophisticated vocational courses within the hub.
Okay. Can I just say that I think this has been a very useful debate, and as I said before, I think the fact that it was actually based on the evidence which is in the outline business plan has been very, very helpful indeed. And I feel that I also attended quite a lot of the consultations when this was first being mooted at the beginning of the year, and I think parents, teachers and pupils felt they'd been frog marched down this idea of a super school, and I think we pulled away from that. And as a result of developing the outline business case, I think we've got a much better option. As I said, from the administration's point of view, we think the emerging option is very much the one which we want to go down. The teachers' unions are obviously bought into this as well. And if the teachers aren't bought into any particular idea, despite the fact that we may tell them what they're going to do, unless their hearts and minds are in this, and all they will do is hemorrhage out all the good teachers out of the region. I do think this is a really exciting project, not only for the region, but for Scotland as a whole. We could actually take the lead in Scotland in terms of delivering education. I think this is an opportunity which we need to grasp. So when we come to we'll go through the recommendations one by one, and we'll decide which option we're going down, although I think a consensus has emerged, I hope. So if we've got the recommendations, we have 2.1, we have received the presentation on the options relating to the Dumfries Learning Town. We've reviewed the contents of the outline business case provided. I hope everybody's read at least the outline business case. 2.3, note the contents in the executive summary as detailed in Appendix 1. Everybody's happy with that? Note the scoring mechanism as detailed in Appendix 2. And agree to recommend one education option from those detailed at 4.3 to full council. So I'll move that we go with the emerging option.
Happy to second that, Chair.
Anybody not prepared to go along with that? No? Good, we've got consensus, and I do think it is important we do have consensus, because we know we need to present a case to the Scottish Government in terms of funding, etc. So if we can't agree consensus at this stage, then I think we'll be struggling thereafter. So I'm very pleased that we have got 100% unanimity behind this. So this will now be presented to full council next Thursday. So we move to 2.6. Agree that officers now develop funding and detailed delivery options for the agreed educational option, i.e. The emerging option. That now obviously will follow approval by full council on Thursday. Agree? Yep. And 2.7, agree that further detail and progress on the agreed option be routinely reported to the Education Committee. Claire's already given us some information about that. I don't know if you want to reiterate what your proposals are in terms of that.
What my plan is with all the projects, I feel that we should be coming to this committee every second meeting, so that's every 4 months. Even if we have a key item to report, obviously we'll come sooner, but I want to make sure there's a regular reporting cycle so that we're brought along with this project, as well as asking for key decisions. So you will have regular updates through a 4-monthly reporting system.
I think if we can build that into the recommendations, so it's formally recorded. I'd be pleased to hear I haven't any other business, so thanks for your attention. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me speaking. I would just like to say that I'm so happy to see our members put the politics on the side. And we are making decisions on the evidence base, and we have put the children and young people on our heart on every decision. Thank you.
Thank you again. So as I say, I have no further business, so thanks for your contribution, and I wish you a Merry Christmas and the best for 2014, including the Dumfries Learning Town.